So this is Julie Yak, and I'm here with Nick Dolman, and he is a solution architect with loads of experience. And I thought it would be great to chat with him about some of the details about communication and getting to know your customers. How you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing awesome, Julie. Thanks. How are you?
I am well, thank you. So let's just jump right in.
Sure.
So we all know that communication is key to getting requirements right. What types of communications do you prefer when you're launching a project?
Well, definitely, email communication is good in that because that could have a lot of detail in it. But if I'm launching a project, I definitely want to get in face to face with the customer if that's at all possible and try to get the key stakeholders in the room. And then that way you can kind of learn by talking to people what their facial expressions are, how they're reacting to things you're saying. And then that could begin to drive some other further communications, not just with the individuals, but with the organization as a whole. Is there key people that are leading this? Is it a situation where there's a committee involved and we have to, make sure all the stakeholders are heard correctly? Or is it, kind of directed by a person that's sort of leading the charge? So I like the face-to-face definitely as at the starting point, just to sort of set the tone right for a particular project.
That makes total sense, Nick, and I completely agree with you. And as much as we all prefer to talk about success, sometimes we do learn more from our mistakes. Can you recall a time when maybe communication just wasn't working well, and how did you move past it?
I was thinking about that, and there's a particular project that comes in mind, and I think we did a really good job on the project itself, but there was key stakeholders that were using the system, and they actually preferred the old system. And even though they might not have ranked very high within the organization, they did hold a lot of power in terms of the systems being used because they were the ones using it. And they pretty much, a little bit of an older generation refused to use the system, and they ended up going back to their old system because this particular person kind of refused to use the new one. I think what I reflected on that one was this is a case of I should have had a better picture of the corporate environment I was working in and tried to remove some of the objections that maybe these users had and tried at a much earlier stage to win them over. And that would have made the project, like I said, I think overall technically the project was a success, but the user adoption was the downfall on this. And that's something I think a solution architect needs to keep their eyes open for, is not just the technical wins, but also the human resource wins as well.
Yeah, because without those happy users, we don't have jobs, right?
Correct.
When we're looking at projects or pending projects and we've got that RFP in our hands and we're reviewing a published RFP, what are key items that you look for in that RFP? What things can we learn from that?
That's a really interesting question. I'm not, to be quite honest, as a solution architect, I'm not a big fan of RFPs, and I don't know many solution architects that are. However, it is part of the system, and we have to deal with it. One of the key things that I look for was the RFP written by potentially a consulting company or a party that's also has a vested interest in potentially delivering that solution? And it's a fair question. You can ask the question. Most RFPs, they have a question period, or you can submit written questions. And that's a question I don't think we should be shy to ask. The question would be, is the folks that have written the RFP, are they also potentially bidding on this project? Because if they are, you're at a slight disadvantage already. The RFP's been, I would say, pre-wired to that particular consulting company. So that's one key thing that I kind of keep an eye out for. And that in turn kind of determines my investment in responding to that. And then there's been situations where, we definitely, as in organizations I've worked with have won over clients, even though the, other people were helping prepare that RFP. Another exercise that I've done recently was was on the opposite side where I had to create an RFP and submit that out. I was working for an organization. It was not a Dynamics 365 project. It was an IT project, but because of my experience and the time I had, I said, yeah, I can run with this. It was a huge eye opener in terms of being on the other side of the fence, seeing the responses, the questions, and the companies that did respond, and also the ones that didn't respond as well, and the reasons they gave why they were not going to respond. So I think to be a good solution architect, you might want to put the shoe on the other foot. And if you're reading an RFP, sort of if you were involved in preparing one, I think you have a unique perspective, which should really help you respond to other RFPs.
Well, I've definitely noticed the difference in RFPs that have been created by the business versus RFPs that have been created by IT.
Yeah.
So when we're actively gathering requirements, let's assume that we've been awarded the project, we're actively gathering those requirements. What stakeholders do you think we might miss? How can we get them involved in the conversations early enough to make an impact?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think, every organization sort of has their own methodology in terms of gathering requirements. And a lot of them involve workshops where you're sitting in a meeting room and you have the sticky notes and the big whiteboards and the paper, and you're trying to list out the requirements, or some of these might already be documented. And I think that's definitely important. But what I also think is a key activity that I try to do is do a little bit of job shadowing. And when you actually ask to shadow someone's process, it's one thing to sit in a meeting room where they say, well, here's our process. We start here, we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, is actually to watch it in action. And then that's where you begin to see where, oh, I need to talk to, Sally down at the warehouse. And you realize, well, how come we didn't talk to Sally before? And then you can actually begin to engage in some of those conversations when you're doing the job shadowing and doing doing some of that requirements gathering. So it's, definitely documenting all that, but also, watching what people do. And a lot of times you'll discover that there's a lot of unconscious processes, or other people are involved, and maybe the organization itself doesn't realize, hey, that these people are involved, or this is the process. This might be the process on paper, but there's actually the real world process that gets followed. And just walking around and meeting people and just seeing what they're doing in their job and what systems they use can actually give you a huge eye opener. And if you do that early in the project, it's, as you design out the solution, you can begin to adapt and address these particular needs that people might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick. I really do appreciate your time today. And I appreciate your insight that you've given us here for our solution architects.
Well, thank you, Julie. Hope you have a great day.